Childhood trauma.
Never been traumatized? Think
of trauma survivors.
Psychological trauma.
Travel to trauma. Why do you
Trauma. One of the most heard words on the internet, right? We have felt it, heard of it, and we have absorbed it. Trauma can happen to a person at any age, at any given point in life. But how does trauma shape a child into an adult they go on to become? How does childhood neglect shape one's life? As psychiatrist John Bowlby said, children are resilient, but every child's resilience has its own limits. Trauma can be experienced even when a child cannot put their experiences into words. So what exactly happens when adults forget that children are not little adults? So I came across this case of the feral child a few days back when I was researching for my assignment. This case has fairly stood out in the history of developmental psychology, as it was one of the first times we could see how much neglect can affect a child and how they live and view this world. We've come across various cases of children growing in isolation, but very few are as horrid as this one, and as recorded as this one. So Genie was born to this couple from California in 1957. She was the second surviving child of the couple. There was a first child, a baby girl, who had died after being left in the cold garage. The second child died from the birth complications. The third baby boy named John survived, followed by 5 years later, a baby girl was born whose name was Ginny. Ginny's life prior to her discovery was one of utter deprivation. She spent most of her days tied naked to a potty chair, only able to move her hands and feet. She had been this way since she was 20 months old until her discovery at 13 years and 9 months. She was completely cut off from any kind of stimulation. The windows were curtained and the doors were kept closed always. She was only fed cereal and baby food and wasn't spoken to at all. When she made noise, her father would beat her up, and at the rare times when her father did interact with her, it was to bark or growl at her. Ginny Wiley's brother, who was 5 years older than Ginny, also suffered abuse under their father. Ginny's story came to light on November 4, 1970 in Los Angeles, California. She was discovered by the social worker to whom her mother had gone to get some services for her own health. The social workers soon discovered that the girl had been confined to a small room, and the investigation by authorities quickly revealed that the girl had spent most of her life in this room, often tied to a potty chair. The parents were soon arrested, but the father could not be put on trial as he had died by suicide one day before he had to appear in the court. All he left behind was a note stating, "The world will never understand." The case had widespread coverage in the country and had gained significant attention from psychologists and linguists. The National Institute of Mental Health provided funding for the scientific research on Ginny's case. The psychologist David Rigler, who was a PhD, was in the Ginny team and had said this about Ginny: "I think everybody who came in contact with her was attracted to her. She had a quality of somehow connecting with people, which developed more and more, but was somehow really from the start. She had a way of reaching out without saying anything, but just somehow she had a look in her eyes and people wanted to do things for her." Upon her initial arrival at UCLA, Ginny weighed just 59 pounds and had a strange bunny walk. She was unable to chew, often spat, and was unable to straighten her arms and legs. She was initially only able to recognize her own name and the word sorry. Her silence and inability to use language made it difficult to assess her mental abilities, but the test stated that she had a level of a 1-year-old child. Now with this, I'll talk about the key findings that were made after Ginny was rescued. Language development. Ginny's case was particularly notable because she had been deprived of almost all human contact and language during her formative years. When she was found, Ginny had virtually no language skills. She made guttural sounds and had very limited vocabulary. Over time, she did make progress in learning language, but it was limited. Ginny's case provided a unique and tragic opportunity for scientists to study the critical period hypothesis in language development. The critical period hypothesis says that there is a window of time during which language acquisition occurs most easily and readily. Emotional management. Ginny's emotional development was severely impacted by her years of isolation and abuse. When she was rescued at the age of 13, she exhibited significant emotional and behavioral challenges, including emotional immaturity, distress, fear of new situations, difficulty forming attachments, and a profound lack of trust in others. These issues stemmed from a lack of exposure to the outside world and the positive relationships, leaving her unfamiliar with healthy emotional responses and struggling to connect with people in a meaningful way. Physical development. Ginny exhibited signs of physical underdevelopment, likely resulting from the years of malnutrition and limited physical activity. This included stunted growth, poor muscle tone, and overall weakness. Her neglect and isolation deprived her of proper nutrition and exercise, impacting her physical health and development. Cognitive abilities. Ginny's cognitive abilities were challenging to evaluate due to her lack of formal education and traumatic upbringing. However, assessments indicated that she likely had below-average intellectual functioning. Her deprived environment and lack of cognitive stimulation likely hindered her cognitive development, contributing to her difficulties in learning and problem-solving. Doctors called Ginny the most profoundly damaged child they had ever seen. The progress initially was promising. Ginny learned to play, chew, dress herself, and enjoy music. She expanded her vocabulary and sketched pictures to communicate what words could not. Once Ginny did start learning and adapting to the new changes in her life started hitting turbulence as the research funding was drying up, and Ginny was moved to an inadequate foster home. Irene, her mother, regained the custody only to find herself overwhelmed, so Ginny was sent to another foster home. Then followed a series of state institutions under the provision of social workers. Ginny had started going back to her old patterns. She would hold her bowels for long hours and wouldn't speak for months. Her progress swiftly reversed, perhaps never to be recovered. So the easiest way I can explain you child neglect is when caregivers like parents fail to meet the child's basic needs. This includes not giving enough supervision, healthcare, clothing, or a safe place to live. It also means not meeting the child's emotional, social, educational, and safety needs. Approximately 5 children die every day because of child abuse, and neglect is the most widespread form of child abuse. It also makes up more than 59% of abuse cases. So as I started in the beginning by quoting John Bowlby, when a child's needs are neglected or are not heard, a message is sent to them that they are not wanted and they are not loved, and that this is all that the world has to offer to them. Children learn by imitating their parents, so your behavior will naturally repeat the negative conditioning you learned as a child. Children tend to store the memories of trauma in their minds or bodies, which can be regressed or shown by aggression. Opposite to what one might think, it is not always forgotten and can show up in various ways as one gets older. Studies show that abused and neglected children are 11 times more likely to engage in criminal behavior as an adult. Children who have experienced abuse and neglect are therefore at increased risk of several problematic developmental, health, and mental health outcomes, including learning problems, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. As adults, these children continue to show increased risk of psychiatric disorders, substance abuse, serious mental illnesses, and lower economic productivity. Now, I believe in Peter Levine when he said that trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be the life sentence. Healing from childhood emotional neglect and other types of trauma is a process that requires time. It requires self-awareness, self-compassion, and oftentimes loads of support. The help is waiting for you out there. And I know this process is easier said than done, but healing is possible. It's not linear, it's not quick, but with proper support and professional help, you could also heal from the wounds you do not talk about. So that was up for today's video. I'll see you again with another better slapping video. Till then, please like, share and subscribe the channel, and always remember to be empathetic. Bye.